Welcome to Global Risk Community Chat. Today, our guest is Viren Parekh. I'm very happy to have you here today in our podcast. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much for having me and giving me this opportunity.
Likewise. So, before we get into our topic, can you briefly introduce yourself to our audience?
Sure. Viren Parekh again, and I work in the area of enterprise risk management. Today, I want to share a little bit on the area of business email compromise and email phishing, and then leading up to business email compromise. This is an area that's a high risk area for organizations, and if we look at just some statistics, and the FBI estimates that in the last 4 to 5 years, business email compromise fraud alone has cost organizations upwards of $40 billion. So it's a huge concern. And with the COVID-19 pandemic and people working from home, and asymmetric sort of cybersecurity controls among the endpoints, that risk has actually intensified.
Mm. Sounds like a very important topic to indeed talk about. We know, of course, that cyber security has been a trending topic among risk managers and cyber
Yeah.
security officials alike, and when it comes to especially this phishing and so on. So, what would be some key things when it comes to this? What else there is to be looking out for?
Yeah. A few things to consider is sometimes the organizations get very involved with their own cybersecurity controls, and that's a great thing, right? We have to be securing our organization very well. But sometimes what people forget is that in a business email compromise situation, it's not just our controls that matter. It's also the counterparty. So if you're dealing with a vendor and you're exchanging a lot of information in terms of when you'll be paying the vendor, how much, based on what conditions. Now, if the fraudster has access to the vendor's emails as well, they can still launch an attack. They can still try and convince you into making the payment to the fraudster. In this scenario, even if you have the best of controls, possibly they may not work from an automated, IT security standpoint. You may have the best filters, you may have multi-factor authentication, all of that is fine. It's also going to be the user awareness that will be put to test. So when you have an email coming in from the fraudster saying, hi, I am so and so from this vendor organization, these are your bills which are due, and can you please pay it into this new bank account which we have recently opened, because our previous bank account is now not functional, or they'll give you some reason. That's when your user awareness, how well you have trained them, and the protocols that you set up when you are changing a bank account, those are the ones that take over. So yeah, I think that's an important one, and a lot of times, a lot of focus is spent on cybersecurity controls and the best gadgets that money can buy, but a little focus is there on the user awareness side of things.
Yeah. I hear this a lot actually. Also, I think we had another guest also speak about this where they gave an example of basically these fishers or these scammers are constantly watching these interactions between you and your vendor or other communications, and then they just find this moment, right moment to just do it, and there doesn't matter how many, I guess, like tools you have or checks you have, as long as you as a manually looking person don't pay attention to if the mail is exactly right or if everything is fine, or even double check with vendor on phone, there isn't much
Yeah.
these tools can do, I guess, right?
Right, right, absolutely. And it's interesting that you bring that up. And when we analyze these situations, what we kind of learn about how these fraudsters are working, it's almost like a organized industry. The first wave is basically trying to get into any email account that they can get, right? So sending out as many phishing emails that they can, gaining access. So that's team one almost. Then team two takes over, who basically read through all of the conversations in the email IDs, and they profile the accounts depending on how lucrative those accounts can be and how profitable they can be. And then, as you very rightly said, they will monitor, they'll search for the right time to stage an attack, and they will appear very credible because they come armed with details. social engineering. We've seen how they even replicate the style of writing that a person has, just to make their email very believable. Once the payment is triggered from the organization, getting that money back proves to be an absolute challenge. The pace at which the money moves and the banking laws, and it becomes a very complicated territory.
Yeah.
So prevention is better than cure.
Yeah, especially if it's international, I imagine it would be even worse. So,
Big time.
yeah, so on that sense, what would be some takeaway points? Obviously, we have shared some examples of what people should be looking into, but what would be the takeaway points that you can
Right.
share with our audience that that they are always alert, look out for certain things and so on?
Yeah, yeah. No, happy to share that. So the first and foremost, training for users, especially the ones who are interfacing with third parties, where they will be privy to or will be in a role where they'll be triggering payments or reviewing invoices. Very important for them to identify phishing emails. And there are certain telltale characteristics in terms of how they do it. There will always be a change of bank account involved. There will be some financial information that vendor will probably seek. So looking for those classic red flags and then taking the action appropriately, that's number one priority. Number two is to have a established set of protocols to follow once you have received an email like that, where a vendor is saying that, yeah, my bank account details have changed. So what do? You first verify the email, and there's two or three steps that you have to follow, right? First, you look visually whether the emails match with the previous correspondence, because typically you will find a slight different, a character or an alphabet here or there. Sometimes the email will even match, right? Because it's a spoofing attack. So what you need to do is hit reply and see whether there's a change in the email ID. There's a third scenario where sometimes fraudsters send out an email from the compromised vendor's email ID directly. So there's no change. The email ID looks absolutely the same. In these cases, becomes very important to call up the vendor, call up the authorized representative in the vendor's firm, and confirm the bank account changes with them. And again, we've seen fraudsters, what they do is, in the phishing email, they'll change the phone number, because typically what happens is a user will pick up their phone and they'll pick it up, the number from the signature, and call them up saying, hi, I've got this email, is that you? Right? There should be in your bank masters, in your systems masters, the phone numbers already preset and agreed with the vendor that, look, if you change your bank account details, we are going to be calling on this number. Unless you have these protocols and you follow it every single time, there will be one that will slip through, and it's an embarrassment. It's obviously a financial loss. It's an asymmetric field, because the fraudster has to try 1,000 times, probably succeed once, they're still fine. Whereas on an organization side, you have to succeed every single time, right? So having those watertight procedures and protocols in place, absolute must.
Yeah. That is, I think, a very good way of also like step by step explaining to people what they should be doing, because otherwise, like if they miss a step, they might still be frauded. So yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, so with that being said, unfortunately we have run out of our time. So thank you so much for sharing this. I
Thank you so
also
much.
with these examples, this step by step as well. I hope that our audience that is listening are more aware of this kind of attacks now and have the correct procedures ready at hand so they do not get into any fraudulent attacks like this. So thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a lovely day.